Dramatic pause. If you listen to, wait, you can't have
Yeah, you can't.
the
Yeah.
episode. There's a mess. Anyway, I was about to do like a reference, and it's a reference if you only listen to the episode we recorded today that will be released in the future, but we released this right away. Absolute
If
disaster.
you're a time traveler, you will know what we're talking about.
Yeah. If you're a time traveler or are listening to this out of order in the future, you will
I
know.
guess that's possible. Yeah.
Possible, but anyway, if that's happened, comment. Anyway, this is the web news, and this week is going to be about niching down, but not in the way you think. I do not mean by, I'm going to niche down a website. I'm going to use those as examples, but that's not what the question's about. So I just want to let you know, you're like, oh, niche down, we've heard this. It's about something else. Mysterious. This is also the very first time we've ever done, I believe, a blind web news. Mike does not know anything about this. All I did was tell him about the niche down thing. I have not told him about anything because I want his real off the cuff answer to the question. Let's do this. So here's the prompt. When someone goes to start an online business, the most common piece of advice that I hear personally is niche down. Now, this is the process of not covering an entire, let's say, topic family. So that would be the primary topic and then all the related kind of surrounding topics, but instead choosing something smaller to specialize in so that they can become an expert and an authority in that niched down space or that niche down topic. I'll give you two examples. These are going to be more traditional examples, but the prompts, the questions is about something else. So stay tuned. Example one, if you wanted to make a golf website, you may want to niche down to just reviewing drivers instead of covering golf news and club releases and golf carts and course information, and the list goes on and on. Example number two, if you want to create a gaming website, you may want to niche down just to cover a specific popular topic. So, for example, you may want to niche down to just reviewing indie video games instead of talking about all things gaming hardware, the best TVs for gaming, AAA games, indie games, and the list again goes on and on and on. So, here's this week's questions or prompts that are related to development, developers, coders, programmers, all the rest of it. Do you think that there is any value in niching down as a developer? Learning a small set of skills, but absolutely mastering them so that you're the authority in that particular space. And as a sub question to the same question, maybe niching down would only work for very difficult or complex topics. What do you think, Mike?
Oh, this is a tough one. It's really difficult to do it as a web developer. Let's just say that,
I
right?
agree.
Web development, yeah, I think in web development, this would be very hard because let's say you decide to niche down into something like Solid Start, niche framework for web development, and you just become the expert on Solid Start. Is there value there? I think so, but the user base of Solid Start is fairly small. It's a good framework, but there's so many alternatives out there that you could be in a situation where you learn everything about it and all of a sudden it just loses popularity. And that's a risk that you take with almost any web development niche topic. Now, we're not covering if you niche down into React because that's not really niching down. You're taking the most popular thing and learning it. That's fine. I think that's great. Like if you want to do that, you're probably in a good spot. But if you're finding a niche and trying to niche down and just becoming an expert in pretty much only that niche, you're really limiting yourself. Matt and I did this to a certain degree with a lot of risk on Chrome apps and Chrome extensions.
Yep.
We niched down into them, and when they were first kind of starting to get popular, and that turned out to be a good thing because we got a client and that like kicked off our kind of larger contracts as we went by. But it could have easily, like, and I mean easily, backfired and us spending a bunch of time and not getting anything. So we got lucky there, and you might get lucky, no doubt about that. But I would be very careful about choosing a niche that doesn't have enough of a user base behind it, if that makes sense. Enough developers, enough learning material, and going really, really deep into it before you learn everything around web development. Now, having said that, there's other, development projects out there. It's not just web development. If it's mobile development, you have a much smaller subset of stuff. There could be many, many different ways you can niche down there and become very, very good. Niche down into specific performance of e-commerce websites or e-commerce apps on web development. If you can save, Temu a millisecond of time for loading a certain product, that could result in them making X amount more money. If you can find a niche that can specifically correlate to profit, I highly recommend trying to get that correlation, marketing that correlation when you find that niche and become good at it. And I almost guarantee you can probably find work at it no matter how much you do. And I mean, having said that, web development is very similar to that. If you can find, again, a niche that can correlate to profit, and there's plenty of them out there, that's going to be a much better chance at you being successful at niching down and getting those jobs. And then the last thing I'll say, the final kind of niche that you could do is niching down into archaic systems that are just losing developers, right? COBOL is one of them. The COBOL is running on a bunch of different mainframes still. A bunch of banks still use them. I believe Flight. I'm not sure about that one actually. I was just thinking if Flight Airlines use them or not, but they might still use them. Anyway, mainframes are still being used by a lot of different corporations, logistics for like Walmart and stuff. And developers are becoming less and less frequent, like in the sense of they're literally retiring or dying off because it's such an old language. So niching down into a dying language could guarantee you some upcoming work that is fairly high paid. Now, it's not easy to niche down in those languages, but that's why it's something that could potentially pay off.
Well, I think you're 100% right about the web development thing too, because the very first thing I thought of was and the easiest one to come up with is a lot of people will niche down and say I'm a back end developer or a front end developer, and I feel like those days are kind of like wishy washy right now, where like a lot of people are kind of expecting a full stack developer, or at the very least maybe you're front end heavy, but you understand because like some of the back end stuff, that's an example of niching down. And I guess like the act of niching down is also like very context sensitive, because like for example, like you mentioned, and like I guess this is a question as well, is like you mentioned like, oh, if you niche down into React, you're just learning the most popular thing. Correct. However, I guess this is like my question on it is, would like if you said I'm going to niche down into React, but when you say that, you're likely making projects like portfolio projects, let's say even that, how would I even describe this? You're making portfolio projects that plug into other things. So it's not WordPress plugins, but it's that parallel where it's like, use WordPress, then there's like WordPress plugins. Well, like if you decided to niche down into like just WordPress and no plugins, like are you really like a WordPress aficionado? Like I mean kind of technically, and I guess you could technically kind of be a React aficionado, but like React is kind of meant, hey, like I'm going to make a website, I'm going to plug into these APIs, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to connect with Next.js, or I'm going to have Next.js in there, so then that's the backend thing, it's going to talk to these databases and all this. And if you're like, I'm going to niche down to the point where like I'm not using it like MySQL, I'm not using any of these databases, I'm not talking to these other APIs, I'm a React aficionado, I'm a WordPress aficionado, like is that useful? And I think the answer to that question is no.
It's a very good question. Honestly, I would kind of agree. Like if you're refusing to use other services, like if your idea of niching down into React is, hey, I'm only going to focus on React hooks. I will become an expert on use effect. I will know every instance that you should only use use effect and when you shouldn't use use effect. I will figure out every like workings of that system, of all the hooks, but I'm not going to know anything about the back end. I'm not going to know anything about databases. I'm not going to know anything about deploying this app or whatever. Like if you just decide that that's really only the thing you're focusing on. In web development, I feel like that's too far of a niche down. You could be the best person at that, but for the most part, 99.9% of companies don't need that person. They like a developer that understands those concepts to a good degree is more than enough. Like you don't need someone that can recite the scripture of use effect for you during your stand-ups. You need someone that knows when to use it and when not to use it, and that's
What
it. So,
what do they call that the guy in Mad Max, like the Mad Max universe? It's like
yeah,
it's like the guy who's like the knowledge man because he remembers the old times and stuff, and it's like, you knowledge man, like what does this mean? Let's say
yeah.
like that, be like have someone in the meeting that's just like the aficionado, be like glossary, speak. Like
That's exactly it. So like it's just it would be very difficult to promote yourself there. I'm not saying impossible. I think there are situations where that could be really useful. You have a very complex React application that's been through a million refactors, and you just can't get the performance out of it that you need to, and you just don't have the team. Maybe someone that knows those hooks to an nth degree is the person you're looking for. That could be the thing, but like I feel like that's really limiting yourself and your opportunities at that point. Like, whereas if you learn React and how to use React for every purpose, or maybe you even narrow down to React for e-commerce, headless e-commerce. That's a niche. That could be something that could actually be pretty beneficial, because again, a lot of websites are now becoming more and more headless to be more custom. React is probably the major choice for most of those websites, the headless part. If you learn all of the intricacies of that whole connection back and forth between Stripe or Shopify and e-commerce side of React, that's a niche in itself. And I would say that that's a pretty good one to learn, because again, most people are still trying to figure out how to sell online. It's not easy, especially as your site grows and your traffic grows. And there's a lot, like you think that, oh, it's just an e-commerce site, but like, what about the analytics? What about the logging? What about the performance of it? Again, when you're talking to marketing people, every second counts for the checkout process. So you got to make that super smooth. Like if you're able to do that and you can prove you can do that, you're going to be pretty hireable. Again, you're following the money. That's back to my point of being like, how do I niche down into something that can actually have a path to profit for the company? Like
You're
if you
solving a
can find
problem.
that,
You are the solution to someone's need. Like you are the solution to someone's issue.
yeah, that's exactly it. Whereas like if you're niching down into building a blogging site, yeah, you could do that, but there's so many general purpose solutions for that at this point that it's like, is that going to be something that people hire a niche down developer for?
And what's the definition of that? Because technically speaking, like a blog like that is going to be something like, hey, like, you know, I'm going to set up the blogging platform like WordPress or whatever, blah, blah, get the custom domain in there, do all this stuff. But then I'm starting to do SEO. And it's like, well, hang on, like we're starting to get like SEO is pretty big. So
Yeah,
now
now
it's
it's like,
like, have I really niched down at this point? Like, sure, like maybe maybe your niche down of your business is like, I get content websites up and running and they're like killer. That would be like solving somebody's thing where like that's your niching down, but you're not niching down to the point where it's like I only use HTML, CSS, and a little bit of PHP to make a
I'm
blogging
only
website.
code. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I like it.
And
That's a
another
good one.
thing too is also like a content creator. I was thinking too, Mike, is like if you decide like you want your YouTube channel to be about a specific thing where like you're the guy that people go to for like that particular family, let's say, of very popular WordPress plugins. If you're the like, there's a lot of companies out there will make a suite of a suite of plugins. Those plugins have hundreds of features, whatever, and you want to become an expert in those. And every single time, somebody like a great one would be like, for example, like ACF, right? And all the surrounding plugins. Or like maybe not even from one company, but like ACF and then any very popular plugin that people use alongside ACF, maybe like Elementor and things like that. Like if you become that go-to person for like, hey, like I make sort of quote unquote standard WordPress websites that are like connect to ACF, and you're having an ACF problem, it's like, hey, I'm going to go to, if it's me, it's like, hey, I'm going to go to Matt because Matt's that ACF plus guy, right? He's a guy who like knows what works in pro and not pro, and he knows what plugs into what and knows what works with this version of WordPress and things like that. That's something. However, just like with making a content site, niching down does have its like pros and cons. Like I might niche down into that, and so I am the aficionado, and everybody that wants that information, quote unquote, comes to me. Like virtually everybody that wants information comes to me. There may only be 14 of them. Like that's like that is a side effect where there may only be 14 people that actually have that need and want to like come to me for help. So I mean, niching down, I would say like Mike, like I don't know if you like to answer the question as a broad statement, I would say niching down, yes, asterisk. And the asterisk is it depends on what your definition is. And I think you that was perfect what you were saying. is you're solving, you niche down to be the expert in somebody's issue, and a common enough issue. Like e-commerce is a common enough issue. Someone using React, common, like React within reason or whatever, like we've already kind of discussed, that's a common enough issue. People using WordPress, ACF, and common plugins, common enough issue.
The other thing that I really want to hammer down too is that, and you kind of mentioned it in your previous discussion there, niching down is only like a quarter of the battle. I think you have to market yourself as the expert in whatever you're trying to niche down, and that will require the expertise of figuring out if there's market fit before you even go down the niche path. And then it will require the constant ability to pump out content or pump out talks about whatever you're niching down on. Like, just by going down the path of learning it is not going to give you anything. You have to prove that you can do it in some way, shape, or form. And that's either going to be through like case studies that you publish, through word of mouth a little bit, or through the talks that you give. Like, a lot of these super niche down people will be on the talk circuit for like years just to establish their authority in whatever niche they want, they've chosen. And then they've become like essentially indispensable because they've figured out not only the technical aspect of it, but the marketing aspect of niching down. Like, just getting good at something isn't enough in this particular instance. You need to be able to sell yourself as well.
Yeah, like it'd almost be like you're niching down into something more specific to save your brain space, right? To be like, I'm going to be a WordPress expert, right? A standard WordPress website expert. Okay, boom, there you go. So now that saved brain space can go into what you just said, which is like your marketing, where you're like, I'm going to also learn some marketing skills so that I'm not learning like React, Tailwind, CSS, PHP. I'm going to go over here and do that. I'm going to Couch CMS, going to go over there and learn Astro. Okay. And I got a little bit of Svelte. Where's that Next.js at? Oh, that's Svelte kit over there. Like many web developers run around like fools. Like, and I'm there too. So I'm not calling anyone a fool other than myself, I guess. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just like people run around like crazy trying to get things done and like learn a whole bunch of different topics. And that happens in web development because we know so many things. But like niching down and becoming that person where it's like, I need help with my e-commerce website on WordPress, I'm gonna go to Mike.
Yep.
It's like that's valuable because I'd be like, I need freaking help. And you call like then they think of you and you call, like in this context, if Mike had niched down to WordPress and WooCommerce, whatever, like me being like, I need to pick up the phone and I'm gonna call Mike immediately, that's a huge benefit. That's a huge benefit. Not only is Mike likely making content and things like that and making some money off the content, but the fact that I'm gonna call him for help immediately, like who else has that? Like, there's so many people that make websites. Mike and I run an agency. There's so many other people that make websites. Like, no one just like comes to us immediately. It's like, oh my God. However, we niche down into the Chrome apps and Chrome extensions, and we got people coming to us because it was like at the time it was like popping off and it was on Windows and things. And like,
Yeah,
like
we
it,
promoted ourselves during that time too. Like, we were
correct.
talking about it on social media all the time. We were, posting stuff about it. So when someone
Job
looked us
boards.
up, or when someone looked at the fact that, like, have we done this? Like, is there proof that they're actually niched down? There was plenty of proof. Like,
Real
and when we
life
got on the call,
downloadable proof right from the Chrome Web
right,
Store.
and we got on the call and we're like, we pointed to that proof and it made it super easy for us to sell.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you have to think from that perspective. Like, how are you going to prove, like, even if you can get a call, that you can do this?
Yeah.
And the higher you get in that niche down cycle, the more authority you have, the more you can charge as well, and the more you can say no. Right? Like, the people that are the people that you think of right away for whatever service are the people that can write their own checks. Like, if you need someone at that point, when you're calling someone of that authority, you're expecting to pay a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
Because if you weren't, you were just going to get a regular person like a regular developer that can just do it for you, because you're thinking about them for a specific reason. So you have to put yourself in that mindset when you're trying to niche down, and it's going to take time and it's going to have phases. You're not going to all of a sudden become an expert. You're going to have to grind a little bit. You're going to have to take on some contracts where you might not be willing to do it or whatever, until the point where you can say that you're an expert when you have the social proof.
It's a very I think this has been a really enlightening episode, or like a edition of the Web News, because you're 100% right. Like, we had those social proofs. We were able to sell, sell our skills and like sell our abilities and things. And we wouldn't have had the time to do that. We wouldn't have had the time to make those Chrome extensions, those Chrome apps, all that stuff if we were trying to learn everything. And I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast, like obviously they're beginners and they're running around trying to figure out what to learn. I'm going to learn this, that, up, down, left, right, center. You know, maybe that isn't what, like to an extent, maybe that isn't what they should be doing, right? Maybe it's like, hey, look at, you know, if you're looking for a job, niche down to what the jobs actually want. If you're looking to like be a content creator, niche down to what you think is going to work on your YouTube channel, for example, or whatever other content creation platform you're using, things like that. And like niche down to solve a problem, it's less about niching down to like cut things out. That is ultimately what you're doing, but you have to look at it through the lens of I'm going to niche down to solve a problem and become the master of solving this problem, and people have that problem. People want to see that content. At the end of the day, I think that's instead of like learning 1,400 things, because like every time I go to sit down, I'm like, I got 2 hours, I'm going to learn something. I'll learn about 14 seconds of 18 things, and then that's that's it. Like it's out of control. Like it's out of control sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that's it though. Unless you have anything else to add, Mike, I think that's the web news.
That's the web news. I think, yeah, we kind of nailed it on that one. Hopefully it helped people make a decision on where they want to niche down. It's something you can decide and then go back on. Like I wouldn't say like lock yourself into niching down all the time, but I think it's a really good thought process of you kind of going through and figuring out what's best for you. And sometimes going deeper is the way to get better, right?
Yeah.
Like regardless of the situation. So I always kind of recommend people go a little bit deeper nowadays, especially because AI is so good at the general aspect of things. If you can be that person, that next level effort person, then it just makes you a little bit more resilient to being replaced and stuff like that. So go deeper for sure.
Absolutely. I think that's it. That's the web news. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.